Well, 1 year ago, the serene valleys of Pahalgam turned into a sight of unimaginable horror. 26 innocent tourists were gunned down in cold blood, an attack that shook the nation's conscience.
March 1993, 13th December 2001, 26th November 2008, 18th September 2016, 14th November 2019, and this day, 22nd April of last year, 2025. These are some dates that no Indian should ever forget, because these are the dates on which innocent blood was spilled, civilians have been slaughtered, and our Jawans have been martyred, all because of the obsession of one country. Pakistan's obsession with using covert proxy war against India and engaging in state-sponsored terrorism has imposed a heavy cost on our country. So let's pledge on this tragic day to never forget and never forgive. Last year on 22nd April, innocent civilians, tourists, were slaughtered in Pahalgam, primarily on religious lines. So today, let's pay tribute to the victims of this dastardly terror attack and use this opportunity to talk about India's response against Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. What has India learned over the past 1 year? How India has fought back in the last 12 months against Pakistan-backed terrorism? What is India's new strategy and the new policy that we are putting in place? That is something we will understand in this short session today. Earlier today, Prime Minister Modi paid tribute to the victims of Pahalgam attack. Last year on 22nd April, at the Baisaran Meadows, a very famous tourist spot in Jammu Kashmir, innocent tourists were slaughtered as they were singled out on religious lines, sending a shocking message across India. 26 innocents killed by the Resistance Front or the TRF, which is essentially a proxy front for the Lashkar-e-Toiba, a Pakistan-based terror group backed by the Pakistani state actors. And India's response, as you know, was decisive, because Pakistan had crossed every possible red line. After the 26/11 attacks, this was the next major attack on Indian civilians. If you look at this social media post by Indian Army, that some boundary should have never been crossed, which was posted just yesterday, this sums up everything about India's response following Pahalgam attack. India launched Operation Sindoor, a decisive and precise military operation designed to target terror and military infrastructure in Pakistan. First, India took aim at the nerve centers of the terror hubs in Pakistan, from Bahawalpur to Muridke, basically taking aim at the headquarters of Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba and the other affiliates. Multiple terror targets were hit, and as Pakistan retaliated and turned this into a conflict, India took aim at Pakistan's military infrastructure as well, destroying air bases, air defense systems, radar networks, and thus we imposed a heavy cost on Pakistan. Now, we are not here to talk about the details of Operation Sindoor. That is something all of you must be aware of. We are here to discuss what happened after Operation Sindoor, how India has maintained a consistent counter-terror response in the past 12 months. What has India done to bring the perpetrators of Pahalgam attack to justice? So let's talk about the new doctrine and the new paradigm that India has established with regard to its counter-terrorism approach. Operation Sindoor clearly established that India is drawing a new red line for Pakistan. As long as Pakistan continues to engage in terrorism against India, India will not only stop the talks. Anyways, the talks had almost come to an end since the Uri attacks and Pulwama attacks. But India has completely suspended trade, and more importantly, we even decided to keep the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance. As stated by the Indian government, blood and water cannot flow together. So India has made this very clear that as long as terrorism continues to be sponsored from across the border, there won't be any talks with Pakistan, no friendly relations, no trade, no cross-border engagement, and more importantly, India will ensure that we will fully utilize our capacity and allotted rights over the Indus waters, thus levying significant pressure on the Pakistani establishment. Then, more importantly, India made it clear through Operation Sindoor that we will no longer distinguish between state actors and non state actors. Even if an attack is carried out by non state terror groups such as Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Toiba, or any of their proxies, India will not only hit these non state targets, India will even take aim at the state targets which might be backing and supporting these entities. If Pakistan's army or any other branch of its armed forces or its intelligence agency, the ISI, are involved in backing, arming, funding, and training these terror groups, even those state and military targets would become legitimate targets for India. This is a new paradigm that India has established. India has made it very clear to Pakistan that there will be a price to pay. This is something we have seen since 26/11 attacks at least. India has constantly stepped up the pressure through course of diplomacy, through engagement, through diplomatic pressure, and as well as through coercive military action whenever necessary. Following the Uri attacks, precise surgical strikes were carried out in 2016 aimed at the terror camps in POK. After the Pulwama attacks, Balkot airstrikes were carried out by the Indian Air Force. And now, following Pahalgam, India has escalated its response, imposing a heavy cost on Pakistan. That Pakistan's sovereignty would be breached. Both terror and military targets would be deemed as legitimate targets by India. And India has even called the nuclear bluff of Pakistan. Previously, India would always be worried that any military escalation would it reach the nuclear threshold as we climb the escalation ladder. But through these repeated military usage, India has established a new paradigm that we can fight a limited war with Pakistan, impose a cost on the country without resulting in a nuclear escalation. But India, being a responsible nation, has always stated that our response, even our military response, would be proportionate to the threat and non escalatory in nature. In fact, if you remember, on the first day of Operation Sindoor, after India hit the terror camps, India said we have no further ambition or goals to escalate the conflict. We said the attack was proportionate, it was preemptive to prevent any future terror attacks against India, and they were aimed only at non state terror targets. We took a lot of caution to not hit any civilian targets or Pakistani military targets or state targets. But when Pakistan escalated and turned this into a limited war, India had to respond and India had to take aim at Pakistan's military targets as well. So India will climb the escalation ladder step by step. If there is another major attack on India sponsored by Pakistani actors, India will climb this ladder and hit the terror targets again. And if Pakistan turns this into a military confrontation, India will climb the ladder and take aim directly at Pakistan's military establishment, going all the way up to impose a heavy cost on the Pakistani state. So, this new doctrine hopefully should help deal with any future threats as well. But beyond Operation Sindoor, India went after the perpetrators of Pahalgam attack, three terrorists in particular, who were directly responsible for planning and executing this dastardly attack. They were meticulously hunted down by the Indian Armed Forces and intelligence services under Operation Mahadev. Not many of you might have heard about this. In the initial stages, it largely remained a covert operation. Immediately after Pahalgam attack, Indian intelligence agencies led by IB, along with Indian Army, the JK Police, and the other related organizations, they established a very secure grid, a security grid across J&K to ensure that the perpetrators of the attack would not flee India. This operation lasted more than 3 months, more than 90 days, where hundreds and hundreds of troops were deployed, including special forces and commandos. Drones were actively used for surveillance to pick out and map out the location of these perpetrators as they were moving through the dense forests in the Pir Panjal ranges. They were getting some local support to hide and take shelter, but India was able to generate human intelligence. The IB generated precise human intelligence regarding the movement of these terrorists. And this accompanied with technical surveillance through drone based surveillance and electronic interception. India managed to zero down the exact location of these terrorists who were hiding in the dense forests in the higher reaches of the Kashmir Valley. And in this legendary operation, the Indian Special Forces, led by Para SF, they neutralized all the three terrorists. And remember the names: Suleiman, Hamza Afghani, Zibran. And it's not just the main perpetrators who were eliminated. Those who provided logistical support, those who were involved in arranging local support for these terrorists, especially in giving shelter, in aiding and assisting their infiltration and helping them hide from the security forces. All these elements, whom we call as OGWs or overground workers in J&K, they were actively targeted over the past 10 to 11 months. In fact, this operation remains ongoing. According to well known sources within the establishment, India has continued to pursue the logistical handlers, both located within India, especially in J&K, and as well as in Pakistan occupied Kashmir and across the border in Pakistan, both through overt and covert methods. Indian intelligence agencies with the Indian Armed Forces, including the Central Armed Police Forces, such as the CRPF, the BSF, they have been actively working with Indian Army along with the special forces under the J&K police to hunt down those who were involved in aiding this attack in any manner possible, those who were involved in raising the finances for the attack, those who were involved in generating intelligence and carrying out reconnaissance of the target, those who are involved in training and recruiting these terrorists. Each and every individual is on India's radar. And in this ongoing operation, India has been constantly hunting them down. Even as recently as January, February 2026, some of the elements associated with the attack have been neutralized by Indian intelligence and security agencies. India even stepped up its diplomatic campaign. We stepped up the course of diplomatic efforts to corner Pakistan. We not only kept the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance, but India sent out an all party delegation to send a unified message from India's political establishment to more than 30 countries. Across capitals, Indian leaders have raised the concerns of India with regard to Pakistan sponsored terrorism. This creates the much needed pressure to isolate Pakistan internationally. And we continue to pursue the forums at United Nations to designate Pakistan based terrorists as global terrorists through the 1267 Sanctions Committee of the UN Security Council. Now, apart from all these efforts, what is really interesting is that the security grid in the Union Territory of J&K has been completely revamped since the past 1 year. See, within the JK police, which takes the lead role in counterterrorism and counterinsurgency, there is a special operations group comprised of highly trained and well equipped commandos. The SOG has undergone a complete revamping effort in the past 1 year. More young officers, especially from local regions, have been recruited. They have been better armed and equipped with better weapons and better technological aids. And they have trained with elite special forces, including the Greyhounds of the Andhra Pradesh police. The Greyhounds are largely credited with dismantling the Naxals and the People's War Group in Andhra Pradesh, as they are masters of jungle warfare. See, you need to understand something. Since 2021, Pakistan based terrorists, they have been using the forests and the jungles of the Pir Panjal range very effectively. From 2021 to 2023, there was a pattern. Those terrorists who were infiltrating across the line of control, they were primarily targeting the minorities and the migrant workers and as well as Indian security forces. Many killings took place, especially around the Poonch, Rajouri sector. So India has strengthened the security grid over here, and the focus is on eliminating these sleeper cells and modules that are operating in deep forest areas in high altitude regions. They use the natural caves present in the dense forest to hide, giving them a natural camouflage. And that is exactly what India is trying to dismantle. So The greyhounds of Andhra Pradesh police, they have been masters of jungle warfare, and they have been super effective in taking down Naxals and the People's War Group. So the Special Operations Group of JK Police, with fresh recruits from the younger blood, they underwent joint training with the Greyhounds along with the Para Special Forces of the Indian Army. The Para Commandos or Para SF is an elite special force unit of the Indian Army that is engaged in counter-terror, counter-insurgency operations in the same security sectors. So, enhanced security grid has been created over here. In fact, the JK police, along with Para SF and CRPF, they have established temporary positions, temporary bases in deep remote areas of the Pir Panjal range, in high altitude regions as well, to prevent any fresh infiltration and to take down any local networks that are supporting these terror elements. According to a credible source within the Indian intelligence establishment, in the last 1 year, only one local from J&K has been able to join the higher ranks of Pakistan-based terror groups. In fact, the local support has been dwindling. According to intelligence assessments, today there are just around 5 high-ranking terrorists who are locals from J&K. Rest, all of them are foreign terrorists from Pakistan. So this again marks the success of India's counter-terror efforts, as India has cracked down on the terror financing routes. The linkages between terror and organized crime has been broken. The border security has improved. Intelligence gathering has been enhanced. And both overt and covert operations have been stepped up. So finally, India has brought out a new doctrine, a new policy. For the first time, we have a dedicated counter-terrorism policy that was recently announced by the Ministry of Home Affairs. It's called the Prahaar doctrine. It can be seen as a direct result of the Pahalgam attack and the series of terror attacks that we have experienced as a result of Pakistan's backing and sponsorship. So under the Prahaar policy, India has outlined the 7 pillars which would be the focus and priority of India's counter-terror operations. The doctrine clearly states that India will adopt a zero tolerance approach towards any form of terrorism without distinguishing between any terror group or terror entity. The P here stands for prevention of terror attacks to protect Indian citizens and interests. So, as part of the Prahaar doctrine, India is stepping up its intelligence and security grid, as we discussed. In fact, under the Intelligence Bureau, which is responsible for domestic intelligence and counterterrorism within Indian borders, we have the MAC or Multi-Agency Center and the Joint Task Force on Intelligence. These two platforms within the IB, it acts as a collating body, a platform where all intelligence on counterterrorism is collated from multiple sources. Intelligence generated by Research and Analysis Wing, India's premier external intelligence agency, or intelligence generated by military intelligence, or state police, and the state level intelligence bureaus. Everything is collated at the MAC, Multi-Agency Center, that specializes in counterterrorism, and the Joint Task Force on Intelligence. This helps create a unified response. The doctrine clearly recognizes the role of state governments because states are seen as the first responders to any terror attack. And the state police would receive assistance from the central government, from the Home Ministry, to better equip them, to better modernize them and train them. Along with that, the center has specialist forces like the NSG, which can be used for specialist intervention in a counter-terror situation, especially in hijack hostage situations. Many states have raised their own elite special force units for counter-terror interventions. They specialize in close quarter battles and urban warfare. NSG has been decentralized with multiple nodes created across the country. Then R for responses that are swift and proportionate. The doctrine and this Prahaar policy talks about a proportionate response from the Indian side to dismantle terror networks across the country and beyond India's borders. This requires active coordination between all the intelligence agencies as well as the security forces of India. A for aggregating internal capacities for achieving synergy in a whole of government approach, where all the organs of the government, the arms of the government, will come together. Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Home Affairs, the various intelligence services, including technical intelligence agencies such as NTRO, the National Security Council, that acts as an apex body to collate all the intelligence. So there would be a whole of government approach involving active diplomacy on the external front through Ministry of External Affairs, a well coordinated internal security policy through MHA along with state police to crack down on sleeper cells and the modules located in India, and as well as covert campaigns when necessary through RAW, and if required, targeted counter-terror, counter-insurgency operations, especially in J&K, in the border states, and wherever the terror modules might be operating. Following the Red Fort blast that happened, India has really heightened its surveillance. And again, the Red Fort blast is an example of how India was able to intervene before a much larger attack could be executed by these terrorists. It was the timely intervention of Indian intelligence agencies and JK police which helped in minimizing the overall impact and damage of the Red Fort blasts. So you're seeing the implementation of the Prahaar policy in real time. Then India, being a responsible democratic state, has also upheld human rights by stating that we are committed to upholding rule of law. In the name of counterterrorism, will not engage in mindless violence. We'll ensure that human rights are upheld, not just of the victims, but even of those who are accused. Nobody should be falsely accused of being involved in terror activities. The policy reminds us that India is a signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. That balance will be maintained. It highlights the role of the legal framework that we have to counter terrorism. The UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, remains India's primary legal weapon, along with the new criminal laws that we have brought in, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam, Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita. Collectively, they provide the legal framework to fight terrorism, along with Prevention of Money Laundering Act to fight against terror financing. In fact, the document highlights that we not only face threats from Pakistan-based terror groups, but even from global terror organizations such as Al-Qaeda, Islamic State. The document even recognizes how terrorists have become more advanced, how they employ better technology using encrypted messaging platforms, using the dark web and crypto wallets to conceal their transactions. So it also highlights the role of drones, how terrorists effectively use drones with organized criminal cartels to smuggle drugs, funds, arms, and weapons into the country. And it clearly outlines the challenges in front of the security establishment. But India will fight this war as it protects human rights and upholds rule of law as we mitigate the threats parallelly. It recognizes the apex role of the National Investigation Agency as the country's premier counter-terror law enforcement agency. Then A, for attenuating the conditions enabling terrorism, including radicalization. It focuses on the root causes of terrorism, mainly to counter the recruitment by the terror groups, especially vulnerable youth who might be brainwashed and radicalized. To prevent such radicalization efforts and recruitment efforts, the government agencies will work with local NGOs, civil society groups, moderate preachers, and community leaders to ensure that the vulnerable youth are protected. Genuine root causes are addressed through better development, through better governance. So, by providing better education, creating job opportunities, providing for housing and better healthcare, these aspects of administration governance are equally important to counter radicalization efforts. And this calls for a whole of society approach, R for recovery and resilience, through a whole of society approach where even NGOs and the civil society will be roped in, along with moderate religious preachers and community leaders who will be encouraged by the government to play a positive and cooperative role with the intelligence and security agencies. Then India will align and shape global efforts to counter terrorism. Through bilateral ties, we will work with foreign intelligence and law enforcement agencies and will continue to exchange information. We will also push efforts through the UN, as we discussed. We will try to corner countries like Pakistan and push the world to end any distinction between good and so called bad terrorism. Because there are some countries like Pakistan which create that distinction between so called good and bad terrorism. India wants to end that distinction altogether and create a global unified effort. So we will align with international actors. Could be UAE, could be Bahrain, could be Qatar, could be European countries or United States. India will work with them bilaterally and as well as through global platforms, be it FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, which will help us counter money laundering and terror financing. India will take every possible effort diplomatically to corner Pakistan. And at the same time, we will focus on a whole of society approach to help the victims and the young, vulnerable youth who might be radicalized and brainwashed. The document even talks about using the help of doctors, lawyers, professionals, so that the indoctrinated youth can be counseled and brought back into the mainstream. It talks about rehabilitating the victims of terrorism. So, this provides for a comprehensive approach for India. And what is different in the last 12 months is that India's fight against terrorism, against Pakistan backed terrorism, has seen a decisive shift. We are entering the era of technology driven warfare. During Operation Sindoor, we saw the role of drones, loitering munition, kamikaze drones that are used for suicide missions, the importance of integrated air defense networks, the importance of network centric warfare to be able to respond in real time, the importance of maintaining operational readiness at any given point in time. These are some key lessons that have been learned and drawn by the Indian Armed Forces and the intelligence and security agencies. And India is stepping up its technological advancement as well. The domestic drone industry is collaborating with India's defense establishment to develop and mass produce drones as new form of warfare through drones is completely changing the nature of the battlefield itself. From Ukraine to West Asia, we are seeing the decisive role that drones can play in today's combat. How loitering munition can completely change the game altogether. How advanced air defense systems can create a shield. So that is something India is trying to learn and implement. So there are many more steps to be taken, but you can say confidently that India has come a long way since Pahalgam attack. So on this day, let's mark and pay tribute to the victims of this dastardly attack, and also be aware of the steps that India has been taking to fight back against Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. So let me know what you think about this in your comment section. And if you like the video, do press the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.